We are back on the Elite Medical Prep YouTube channel. This is Victoria, but you probably already know that. Today, we are actually going to be talking about when you should consider ditching your study buddy and getting a tutor. So, we know that this doesn't sound super friendly, ditching your study buddy, but sometimes it actually does get to a point where that's really critical. So, let's call Michael Zobel and we're going to talk about it. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Hey, Victoria, glad to be here. Thank you for having me back.
Perfect. So we have some very important questions today, and those are when do you need to get a tutor for your medical school exams? You're definitely knowledgeable about that as an actual USMLE and medical exam tutor, specifically ABSITE. You've done a lot of work with that, which has been amazing. So we will dive right into it. If you're ready, I'm ready. The
Let's do it.
first Perfect. The first question that we have is what are major red flags that you look for or see in students that are really just screaming to you, I need a tutor, get me a tutor. If I don't get a tutor, I'm going to be at major risk for failing my exam.
Yeah, it's actually a surprisingly common problem that students find themselves in. And the worst scenario to be in is finding yourself less than a month away from an exam
Mhm.
and actually scrambling to make up for lost time. So the most important thing you can really do is start planning early. When I meet a student and there is no clear study schedule, there really hasn't been a rhyme or reason to how they're approaching studying, that to me is a big red flag. Now, there are students for whom studying with friends or colleagues is something that sounds interesting and intriguing. There are other students who like to study alone. But whatever it might be, if you're in that situation and there's not a clear schedule, there's not a clear focus on the things that you individually need to emphasize before your exam, that to me is the red flag screaming for help, whether or not they know it.
I see. Okay, and are there any specific kind of like if a student comes to you with, a study schedule that is focusing on specific things, are there any like really detailed red flags that you're just kind of like, "Oh, I think you might have been reviewing in the wrong way. A tutor could really benefit you at this point in time."
Oh yeah, I mean there are a ton of benefits to a tutor, and we'll get into it in this
Right.
discussion. I'm sure the pros and the cons. But when I have a student who shows up and there's may have a very detailed, organized schedule, but they're really spending too much time on subjects that maybe don't require that amount of time, or they're spreading themselves thin across a number of resources, then that to me is also an indication that that student may not be getting the best use out of their time. Reality, if you're working with a professional and you have a real serious study schedule down, you don't need more than a couple resources. And I think that's the job of a tutor, is to really lead those students in the right direction. It's not just about the hours you spend in a session working one-on-one. It's also about that tutor really creating a framework and a schedule and a guide for you as you approach studying and spend what would probably be 95% of your study time outside of those tutoring sessions.
So, aside from study schedules, really quickly here, and then we'll get into kind of when do you actually need to get the tutor, ditch the study buddy, get really serious with this. Something that we have been seeing a lot on Reddit and some of the online forums lately, in light of the release of the new NBMEs, is what time frame and what NBME score is a red flag. We have students that are saying, I'm maybe 3 weeks out from my exam date and I just took an NBME and my score is coming in like 20 points lower than I needed or something like this. Is there any kind of rule of thumb where if you're at a certain place at a certain point in time, that's like the trigger point, go and seek tutoring help?
Yeah, it's a magic question, and I think that for the short answer is that for every person it's different.
Yeah.
But you can definitely go with some sort of general rules and principles. If you find yourself, less than about 6 weeks out, and you're
Mhm.
finding that your scores are more than 10 to 15 points below where you're shooting for, you are really at risk of missing that. I think
Mhm.
6 weeks for all of us here at EMP is really a magic time window
Yeah.
before whether it's USMLE step one, step two, or even step three, because that's really enough time for you to organize yourself. And if you really dedicate yourself on a full-time basis, you can make some significant improvements. But if you're looking at your exam date quickly approaching and you are more than 20 points off, you are going to need a dramatic intervention, no matter how much time you have.
Right.
make up that difference.
So when you mentioned 10 points, 10 points was kind of the if you're 10 points away, then you might be kind of missing your mark. Are you referring to the NBME exams for 10 points away? Or we've heard a lot that the UWorld exams can overpredict a little bit. Some other exams from other companies can underpredict. That's the NBMEs, correct?
Yeah, exactly. But you're
Mhm.
asking all the right questions because there are a number of
Yeah,
different ways that students can get these predictive scores, and everybody wants to know what is the most accurate predictor of my score overall. And the reality is it's variable. These NBME, some of them are extremely accurate, more so than others, which are extremely inaccurate and historically so.
right.
So as opposed to sort of trusting a lot of this process to Reddit and other forums where
Yeah.
one person, spreading word that may be misinformation. That's really why it's important to get yourself in with a professional who can really say to you, listen, this NBME historically, we know from our experience working
Right.
with just like you, is underestimating, overestimating, whatever it might be. This is such an important moment in a medical student's career is how you do on these exams. You don't want to trust this to the Reddit forums. You really want to put that in the hands of somebody you can trust.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here talking about this today, debunk some of the Reddit stuff. So we'll jump right in then. And the first, not the first question, this is like the fifth question is that, so what would the pros of getting a tutor be as opposed to a study partner? We see a lot, people are posting all the time that they're looking for a study partner, specifically outside of their medical school sometimes because they do want that kind of fresh opinion. But when is it, you know, the time to get the tutor? We already discussed that, but now a step further is why might that be better than an actual study buddy?
Yeah, I think the most important pro of working with a tutor is that that person is a pro. I mean, these are professional tutors who really are trained not only in the exam, but in how to work with students who are preparing for the exam with a variety of experiences behind them. People are extremely closely vetted here at EMP before they're hired as tutors, and their progress with, students is monitored very closely. So you
Yeah.
can be sure that if you're working with a tutor, that they not only have that training, but also a track record of success. So I think that's the most important. Similarly, as I compare in the blog post to buying a car, you want, or somebody who's fixing your car, you want somebody to be a professional. You don't want Uncle George looking under the giving it his best
Yeah,
shot because that incentive and training is not there. The
right.
second I think is really important about working with a tutor is that it is all about you. There is nothing shared. You're not working with a classmate who has their own anxieties, own priorities, own strengths, and own weaknesses. You're working with somebody who is completely there to focus on what it is that you need to succeed. And I think that's an extremely underrated advantage. And the final thing is that the opportunity to have a new perspective, somebody else looking in from the outside and assessing what may be a roadblock to you reaching that goal, that's
Mhm.
something really invaluable. So you want to have somebody who has that global 30,000-foot perspective, who has seen a student go from a certain spot to an end goal, and you want to have that perspective on your side.
I just want to quickly hit on something that you just said, and that was that somebody with a different perspective. Now, I think that there's a little bit of a misconception that just by getting a study buddy from a different medical school than yourself, that they will actually be able to bring kind of that different perspective. And in some cases, that very well might be true. However, I think one of the big differences between a study buddy and a tutor is that your tutor is the one that's really going to be real with you, right?
Right,
That's the
right,
person that's going to say, all right, listen, here's kind of where you're going wrong. They're not going to be sugarcoating anything or feeling like, oh, yeah, you know what, maybe I should tell them, maybe I shouldn't. You'll get all the information from your tutor, whereas maybe a study partner might be a little bit more timid to hurt your feelings or anything, or say, I think you're going about it all wrong. Nobody really
right.
wants to hear that. But when you're paying for a tutor and actually working with one of these individuals, that's our job. That's your job.
Yeah, I would compare it to professional athletes who have somebody prepare them for these, pre-draft workouts. That's really what USMLE is. We're all hoping to be drafted in residency, and you
Yeah.
have to have your numbers meet that. So you're absolutely right. When you're working with a friend, whether or not that friend is located, at your medical school or another medical school, you're really relying on your collective experience and what you thought was important as you were progressing through your
Right.
career. The advantage of a tutor is there's somebody who's already looking back upon all of that, has that perspective, has the ability to put it into context, and just like you said, has the real incentive to be real with you, because there is nothing that they stand to gain or lose except your success. And I think having that strength behind you, I think that's something that is just, it's immense.
Right. So then are there any cons? Is there any reason, maybe not to get a tutor aside from certainly financial uh,
Well, that's it.
considerations?
You're
Yeah.
right. I mean, that's it. So I think that if you talk about accuracy, efficiency, trustworthiness, sure, you're going to have a tutor that's going to, be the most attractive option for every student. But I
Right.
think reality is cost. And so what I tell students is, we're not here to tell you how to spend your money, because we know what it's like to be medical students. Resources are extremely limited. A majority of our students are probably on scholarships or receiving financial aid
Right.
or just acquiring mountains of debt. And so I think you have to look at these exams and your preparation for them as a huge investment. If you see the potential of scoring at a certain level as opening up a world of opportunity for you with regards to getting into residency or the residency of your dream, I mean, how can you really quantify that value, right? You have to look at that and put it in perspective. So I certainly would never force or coerce a student into getting a tutor, but I always say that you have to think about it like an investment, like any other, and your time similarly is an investment. So I think if a student is able to figure out whatever plan that may work, however many sessions per week, I think we're here at EMP to really tailor that experience to whatever a student is willing and able to provide.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that you said is that in terms of not wanting to like coerce anybody into doing tutoring, anything like that, that's one of the reasons that we actually offer the complete refund if you don't use some of your
Right.
hours. So,
Right.
if somebody starts working with you or any one of our tutors and then, they don't use all their hours or they decide to stop doing tutoring for any reason, we refund all that. So I think that
100%.
that's something that I feel really good about, specifically with elite medical prep, just because that's something a little bit unique, and I think that's in place specifically because our founders are MDs that went through
Yeah.
this
And have
and
been through it, and so are the
took on.
tutors. And
Yeah,
so, if I have a student who I know is sort of reaching a point where maybe minimum returns, or I can tell that the cost or something is becoming a stress. I mean, there's always the option to pause,
yeah,
get money back, take time away. I mean, this is really supposed to be here to help you. So if our students are not getting what they want out of it, we don't want them wasting their extremely
of
precious.
course. Right.
So
Yeah.
I think in the end it is something that's important, and I think that for a majority, much more than a majority of students who come through, the results are really worth that investment. But absolutely, I think it's important to have that mindset as you come into the experience.
Right. So enough with the money stuff. The very last thing that we're going to ask is, um, let me just see really quickly. um, okay. Do you have any insight on how students can feel better about getting tutoring? We know that there is definitely a heavy stigma for a lot of medical students that feel like, getting that tutor is the last resort, or you're a weak student, or something's going bad in order for you to seek tutoring, which likely comes a lot from kind of people's tutoring experiences in high school, or undergraduate, university time, because in those contexts, usually it was for students that were struggling. But what would you say to people that kind of have that same mentality when it comes to medical school tutoring?
I think what we have here is a really unique population, because anybody who's in medical school or DO school, you are extremely competitive, you are extremely
Yeah,
talented. You've reached this point because you've been self-selected. And so I think that the idea that you've now gone from an extremely high functioning person who now may require a little bit extra help, there is a stigma associated. There are concerns, but the most important thing for somebody to consider when they're thinking about getting a tutor is that we are professionals here. Our job is not to stigmatize, it's not to mock, it's not to judge. Our job here is to help you. That's what we do. We do this because it's something that we're really passionate about, that we really enjoy doing. And so I think that is why it's important that when you reach out and you get help, you need to do it from somebody that you trust, and somebody who has a track record of success and a track record of not only getting students to that final goal, but getting there while teaching them lessons that they may use for the rest of their lives while studying, and while
absolutely.
positive way, because ultimately you're absolutely right. Nobody wants a tutor that's there to scorn them and scold them.
Great. Well, I think that's everything. If anybody has additional comments, questions, put them in the comments. Maybe we will call up Michael again and do more videos.
I'm always here. Thank you, Victoria, for the time.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you. Have a good day.
it. All right, take care.
All right. And a huge thank you to Michael Zobel for taking the time out of his day to answer the questions that we have about when it is time to get a tutor. We covered some awesome topics on there, talking a little bit about the costs, literally the costs, some of the benefits of getting a tutor, pros, cons, all of that good stuff. So, see you next time. Make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and tell us in the comments anything else you want to know. See you later.